Okay, right. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Let me share my screen here.
You
So,
unmute there.
No, we are unmuted.
can they can hear me?
So
Everybody
Liam
can hear
online can hear you, as long as he's around, and no pressure, Salim. If you have questions and don't want to come off mute, I'll watch the chat. If you do want to come off mute, please feel free to. I think we got enough room for you to ask questions if you'd like.
Jeremy, I sent you a request.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Thank you.
You never know how many tabs you have open until you have to present to people who you don't know. So give me all right, I think we cleaned everything up for everybody. So, interest of sanity. Awesome, sweet. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Vago. I'm here to talk to you all tonight about AI, how it's here for business users, what that means for AppSec, some of the new challenges that are presenting themselves from a security perspective. And I'm going to start out with some interesting things that are not traditionally rooted in security, but I think they'll help really lay the foundation, make a lot of sense. Before we do that, I'll just give you a quick introduction. So I'm Chris, I'm a sales guy, so go easy on me. I've been in security for 8 years. I started at a mobile security company and startup, moved on to cloud security, did cloud security for 7 years. Palo bought the company I worked for, so I spent a lot of time at Palo in the firewall world. But we're going to stay away from that firewall. We're going to stay away from the F word tonight and just really focus on like the new stuff. And now I'm at Zenity. So I'm not going to tell you a lot about Zenity because I got to follow a bunch of rules and I want to be respectful. But what I will tell you is we know AI security. We were founded by 2 ex-Microsoft alumni. Our CTO is the chapter lead for OWASP, low code, no code. And we also have an open source Gen AI attack matrix we'll talk about, and some red team tools I'll share after the talk. So we've been doing this for a while. As you can see, we pretty much hit the talk circuit every year. Our biggest talk last year was about breaking Copilot. So Black Hat last year, we broke Copilot 15 different ways. Some of those have been fixed. Some of those have not been fixed and have been told to us through responsible disclosure that they are a feature, not a bug. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means as we go through this. So what to expect tonight, I've broken this down into 3 categories. AI is here for business, AI is here for business users, and AI is here for you guys to secure. So as we go along, if you have questions, ask them. If you want to save them until the end, you can do that as well. And as always, remember, I thought this was really pointed and perfect. So the machine has no brain, so use your own. It is AI after all, it's not real. So it's a high level introduction, changes very rapidly. Agentic AI agents are changing so fast I can't even keep up. Every day I circulate an AI agent newsletter, and it is not hard to make because there's so much happening in a way that I can't really put into words. So securing that AI also changes, and have fun and do your research. I think is most important. So AI is here for business. Why would we talk about the business? First of all, we're going to stop with agentic. I hate the word agentic. I did a Google search history, and it came out of nowhere. Like in March of last year, there was like no searches for it. October, Gartner says it's a thing, and now everyone's talking about agentic. But it's a really simple way of saying an AI assistant that has been given power. So we'll talk about what an agent is, and we'll talk about why it's so important. And it's not these guys, and it's not Tom Cruise as a sports agent. So I think it's always important to know when we think about agents, a lot of people misunderstand, are they just our assistant, like a Copilot or a ChatGPT? What it is, how does it work? So this is a diagram of an AI agent that I had constructed. So what we see here, we have a tech support agent. And this tech support agent is given its agentic properties, its agent properties, by having access to knowledge. So you can see here, it's been given access to a CSV file. It's titled CSM top 20 accounts. So it's a tech support agent, it's got access to my files, my top 20 customers. And the goal for this agent is to help my customers get responses at a much faster rate than I can provide. So not only do we give it knowledge, we gave it the ability to take action. So it's connected to Salesforce, our CRM. And most importantly, what makes it an agent is that it has the ability to be triggered without human interaction. So this trigger is set up that if you email me, it just starts the trigger. It triggers the flow and it goes through the knowledge and the topic resources. So that's what makes up an agent. It's the ability to have knowledge and power. You know, if we took out just this is just, I could do this with Copilot or ChatGPT. I can upload a file and technically it has knowledge, but it can't do anything unless I prompt it. Even if I connect ChatGPT to my G Drive or to any other integration, again, it still requires me. And so really what makes the difference is the ability for it to be kicked off by something else, not the owner of the agent itself. So I told you we'd talk about the business, and this was something I started with the last time I gave this talk, and it really helped set the tone because what I hear pretty much every day for the last 6-7 months as I've been doing AI security is, why don't we just turn it off? Maybe we don't want to adopt it. It's a security nightmare. Those are all valid points and very accurate points. But the market segment growth is going to be $200 billion in the next 9 years. And this is quite frankly just a train you can't stop. It's too much, there's too much money being poured in, has too much of a large impact. So I won't go over that too much, but I always think it's important to preface that this is what I see coming down from the board, the CEO, the CIO, and often security teams are just left holding the bag, told to figure it out. It's kind of like how the cloud was when everybody left the data center and just dove in head first to the cloud without even thinking about should they go to the cloud or what should they put in the cloud. They just went straight to the cloud. These were decisions made by business units, not necessarily security teams. And as we saw with the shared responsibility model and constant cloud security leaks, security teams had to just pick up the pieces based on the rapid pace of development. So we're starting to see that again, just in a different format. The people that are providing your organizations with these technical tools to your business users, these AI agents, are the usual suspects. So I thought this was important as well, because it's one thing for a new technology to come along and then be adopted, but it's another thing when that technology is already in your stack, whether it's M365, whether it's Salesforce, ServiceNow, any of the cloud providers. The people that are pushing AI on you are people that are already being procured by your companies. And I talked with an organization recently, and they said, we have ServiceNow, but we don't have the AI agent piece yet. We have an old version. And I asked, I said, is there a sales guy pushing you to upgrade? And he said, of course. So, eventually, the technologies that you own, they're all going to have this capability. And there's not going to be like 2 versions. I think in the last month, Microsoft rebranded Microsoft Office, which is what we all know as Word, PowerPoint, Excel, to Copilot 365. It's not even called Office anymore. It's just called Copilot 365. And that's because you can't buy it without Copilot. So they just rebranded it. But, all of this doesn't come without benefits and outcomes that will be really good for, businesses. So I broke it down into 4 categories. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we have operational efficiency, productivity gains, customer experience, and financial impact. I think some of these are more obvious than others. The one that struck me the most was actually financial impact, to seeing that companies adopting AI have a 15% higher market share for publicly traded companies was really surprising. The other ones are obvious, reduction in, workflow efficiencies or how much like actual work you have to do. Those ones are obvious, but I had not thought about, I guess, the correlation of adoption with, how it could really impact the bottom line. And as we saw on the previous slide, the very first slide about money, the ROI right now is for every $1 your company invests in AI, it's worth $4.60. And so again, when we think about, can't we just turn this off? If that's how it is today and it's only going to get better, I don't know how you, with a straight face, explain to anybody in your business that you don't want that sort of value. So what does that mean for business users? And that's really why I'm here. I spend a lot of time talking to security teams about the business users. So when we think about it, we were all warned about AI from the perspective of Skynet, the end of the world, bad things are going to happen. I don't want to, be a doomer. I don't think this is where we're going. I think we have a much more challenging issue on our hands, which is real AI threat is just your everyday, regular people, just your average business users. They have more power than ever. They have the same power as developers now, but they have none of the awareness that there are best practices or that they even need to consider security. It's one of those things where it's like, do you think anybody understands PCI if they're, if they're just an HR person and they just want to build a report? Probably not. So I am joking a little bit, but not really. And we'll go into kind of like how these things get built, some of the more interesting facts about it. But I thought, as a business user myself, right, as an average Joe, I'm not a security practitioner. So it's important to understand, like, I've never been able to develop things. I'm not a coder, but now I can code things. I can build agents. And sometimes I find out the hard way that, you shouldn't build things the way you do. So when we think about that, everybody who is using an agent today, it's kind of broken down into a couple things. You have your channels and you have your assistants. So whether it's Copilot and it's in your Teams instance or it's in your Slack, you already have access to these things. What happens is they pull from the knowledge base, and that's really where the AppSec rules just get thrown out the window. You can't follow the principle of like securing the crown jewels if all of your crown jewels are required for the tool to work. There's not really a lot of guardrails there. If you're going to connect the AI to your SharePoint, it's fundamentally hard to apply any of those logic. Again, we went over this, it's knowledge and actions. And these agents are built through technologies. Microsoft Copilot Studio is the largest one, and these are low-code technologies. So when you think about low-code, it's by design, and same as an agent or same as an assistant, by design, built for you to not really have to worry about what's going on under the hood. And that's, further pursued in the building of agents. So I can build an agent, I can send it to Jeremy, he can use it. I can create my own agent for myself. Jeremy can create an agent for me. At the end of the day, this is all about regular business users doing things that they think will improve their productivity or make their job easier. And more often than not, sharing it with the people because they think it's cool. Before we pivot towards more traditional security stories, I just wanted to kind of highlight. We talked about the outcomes and the benefits that were promised. And right now, the outcomes and benefits are actually higher than promised. So I pulled a couple of these. I thought this one was interesting. It's Copilot 365. Software dev time was reduced from 8 hours to 2 hours. So a 75% reduction. Next one was Salesforce. Again, this is technical support queries. So kind of like the agent I showed you, 40% improvement in self-service resolution rates. So these things are ultimately going to make your business better, but they do come with, flaws.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
On the dev time improvements, was that overall, so was it experienced developers or new developers or kind of emerge of the?
I'll have to look into the case study. I'm happy to provide it. I'll link to
I
it.
was just curious because I feel like senior developers can probably get more out of it because they know what to
Yeah,
ask of it.
they know what to ask and they know, I guess they have a better foundation, yeah.
Right, versus new developers aren't even gonna be sure what they're asking, so is it really gonna improve their?
Yeah. That's true. I will double check. I'll provide that. I have a resource section at the end, so I have
Okay,
a ton
I
of
just think that'd be
resources.
an interesting
Um,
data point on that.
Yeah, actually, I hadn't thought about it. I think my gut is that it's not professional developers because it's M365 Copilot and not like GitHub Copilot, but I'll double check. Same here, we have Azure AI agent. You know, the case study said 67% increase in productivity across 35,000 employees. It's a pretty large quantity. And then the last one was British Telecom using ServiceNow. Their agent allowed them to cut resolution time from 45 minutes to 50 seconds. So whether you're submitting the ticket or, you know, trying to triage the ticket, that's really crazy amount of time that's getting put back on your calendar, put back in your life. So to summarize on the business user front, there's 3 ways people can build and use agents. They can build custom standalone agents with low-code tools like Copilot Studio or Salesforce Agentforce. I'm sure we've all seen the Matthew McConaughey Super Bowl commercials where he's trying to say that, you know, agents can help put together better dining plans for restaurants. You can build extensions and plugins that connect to and from AI assistants. So an example here could be, you know, Microsoft Copilot 365 connecting to Power Apps or Power Automate using Copilot Studio. Or you can just use the AI agents, assistant, Copilot to get more done. So Copilot, Einstein, Gemini, ChatGPT. You know, really, there's a lot of ways people are building and using these things, and the adoption rate just keeps growing. So on to the main course. Agents are here for you to secure. So as I mentioned, I spent time in cloud, and when I started in cloud, it was just CSPM. So it was really just like, what is the CMDB for my cloud inventory? You know, what do I have? Who has access to it? What could go wrong? What's actually happening? Then, you know, a couple years later, containers came along. They got massively popular, and that kind of kicked off the genesis of DevSecOps with infrastructure as code security. So when I look back on the last 7 years, I see immense parallels because history obviously repeats itself, but hopefully not in the same way that, you know, some of the hard learnings came from the cloud perspective. And so when you think about it, if you think about DevSecOps, where you're trying to marry developers and security to solve this problem and shift the security burden left, AI is the same problem, but instead of professional developers, it's just business users. So it technically is DevSecOps, but it's not really dev. It's, I guess you just call them like, I think Gartner calls them citizen developers, but I think business users is more appropriate. They haven't earned that really developer title yet. So it's Groundhog Day, right? We've been here before. I think it's important to kind of walk through this. I get these questions a lot. So these are the 5 things we'll talk about from a traditional perspective. I'll actually move this because it's out in the way. So this came up in my last talk, the firewall one. So we'll actually start at the bottom. Someone said, you know, why can't I put an ACL on it? And so when you think about it, the challenge with the native tools or the traditional tools is this is a whole new world. So from a native tool perspective, like Microsoft has their own tools, Salesforce has their own tools. They all have their own tools. Challenge that we've found from a security perspective is, 1, they're not cross-platform and nobody's single threading their adoption. And then 2, they're mostly like inventory governance tools. So how many users do I have? How active are the users? Are there any depreciated or orphaned resources? There's hygiene. They're not security. There's no policies. There's no remediation, and there's, you know, no way to really do compliance. We talked about it on the code scanner front. On the code scanner front, there's no code to scan. So your SAST, DAST, IAST, SCA, that all goes away because there's literally nothing by design that the tool will let you see. And that's because they don't want the business users to be freaked out by the technical nature of code. DLP has a place. You'll notice I said the tools are flawed. I didn't say they didn't work. So DLP has a place in this equation. Because at the end of the day, this is a data governance, data security problem. And I saw Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce. He's on a rampage against Copilot, as he should. He's got a vested interest to push his product and say Microsoft's is bad. And he said, Copilot lets you ask questions like, what is my CEO's salary? And it'll tell you. And maybe that's true, but that's not a Copilot problem. That is a data governance problem. And it's just a new vehicle for data leakage to exist. So data loss prevention, it does have its place. It's not required. It's foundational. It's necessary for labeling of your file, like, knowing PII files, for instance. But the problem with DLP tools is they're not going to be able to, well, one, obviously have the business context of what I'm building. Two, they're not going to be able to scale with the infinite ideas. If we're all building an agent to get an answer for a question, we're all going to ask the question different than the other person because we all came from different backgrounds. We'll likely get the same answer, but we'll prompt it differently. And so it's really impossible to scale the kind of the prompt list from a DLP perspective. But I will say, we'll talk about file labeling here in a minute. On the SaaS security front, how many of you are familiar with like SaaS security posture management tools? Maybe like an App Omni? Yeah, okay, perfect. Great tools have their place in the stack. So if we pick on a SaaS security tool that's hooked up to Salesforce, the challenge is it might see, hey, this is my Salesforce instance. Here's how it's configured. It might see that, you guys have access to Agentforce or Einstein, but it's more like a line item for them. It's not going to be able to have that business context. It's not going to know how your business users are building things. It just knows that it's part of your subscription. And then the last one is firewall. This one, it's similar to DLP. The way I think about firewall is from an AI perspective, there's just too many variables. And so even if you block 100 prompts, someone's going to come up with that 101st prompt. And it's going to negate all the work you just did. It's always going to be a cat and mouse game. And so the firewall, it is really not built for this. It's not built for this tool at all. And so we do see it get used as kind of like an allow block list, but eventually you have to evolve beyond, that technology, you have to evolve beyond that mindset. So what can you do? You can rely on your foundational security rules and principles. So inventory, you have to know what you have from an AI perspective, what AI systems are being used, who's accessing them, how are they building them, what are they being used for, who are they sharing them with. You got to monitor those systems so you can have an understanding of what could go wrong based on current setup and what's actually happening. And then you have to follow the best practices and frameworks, and of course, your internal policies to be compliant and have controls throughout the life cycle of the agent. So like I said, there's some good stuff here. There's some familiarity. It's not all familiar. There's some new risks. So if you take a look at this pyramid, I think this is a good way to look at it. I had a similar pyramid when I was learning about cloud security. So the bottom layer is obvious, like this is going to be the infrastructure layer. This is going to be the layer, your providers. So Microsoft, Salesforce, OpenAI. These are your vendors. Above that, you have information governance. These are typically monitored by your existing security tools. So this is where you have data protection classification, access management, data governance, really. But above that are three new layers to the pyramid that, unfortunately, which no one in security wants to hear, require a new tool. I know we have enough tools, and I know it's hard to keep track, but that's really where this goes. And so since we all love acronyms, I went ahead and let you guys have a cheat sheet here. So you've probably heard a lot about AI SPM, so AI Security Posture Management, and AI DR, so AI Detection and Response. And like all acronyms, they are very broadly painted and they mean something different to everyone. But in the form of agents, if you think about these last three layers, we'll kind of work down from the top, right? You got to know what you have, who has access to it. So that's your inventory on the governance front. On the detection and response, this is really interesting from an agent perspective because it's the need to understand the inputs and outputs. So you have to focus on the prompts that are being submitted and the information that is being returned. So it's similar to like setting a healthy baseline. So you're gonna profile and understand like what is usual behavior for this agent. And then on the runtime inspection and enforcement, that one is really where you're gonna have to do the blocking and tackling. So if you think about it from a prompt injection perspective, it's the ability to stop a prompt injection in real time. And we'll talk a little bit about those examples as well. So remember that agent we looked at earlier, our tech support agent. Let's kind of go through it again. So we have our tech support agent. It's got the knowledge, it's got the action to Salesforce, and it's got the ability to be triggered when it receives an email. This looks like a good agent, but there's one thing I didn't show you, and that's where it's a bad agent. So when you build these agents, you have a couple different things you have to think about, and the average business user doesn't really think about them. So this one in particularly has access to everyone, the public at large.
You get email?
Hmm?
Right below the Salesforce
Yes.
arrow that you drew, it can send email.
Yes.
That feels scary.
Well, actually, no, it can't send emails. What you see here, now that I look closer at it, so, actually, yeah, you're right, it can't send emails, that's obviously how it works, yeah. So if you kind of look here, right, so it has public access, so that the public can view the agent, and we already kind of went through these, but if you kind of look one layer deeper, right, it's also connected to 365, so that it can take action into Outlook. And so I think, kind of to your point, once it gets if you email this agent, it's going to email you back. And so if it's open to the public, then the public can essentially get inside. They can become an inside threat. Thank you, Jeremy, for pointing that out. So we're going to go over two different categories. How do we protect the users from AI, and how do we protect the AI from the users? So the first one's really easy. This is on the homepage of ChatGTP. It's at the very bottom in the smallest font they can make. It just says, makes mistakes, check your sources. The second one's from Perplexity, and this one actually annoyed me tremendously yesterday. Because Perplexity claims to, and is traditionally successful from the search engine optimization. So it's basically ChatGTP with Google. It's this combination that I would call it. It's usually pretty good at web searches. Unfortunately, yesterday it said, I can't verify the existence. So I asked it for some AI update, AI articles, today's AI articles, and that was on yesterday, March 11th. And it said, I can't verify the existence of articles from March 11th because my knowledge was cut off in 2023. But when I then prompted it a second time, same exact prompt, worked just fine. So it thought it had cut off in 23. Turns out it could give me information in real time. So I think that's kind of what's interesting is that the response it gave me, as you can see here, speculative URLs for demonstration purposes only. So if you don't check your work, it gave me like 10 stories and they were all 404. They were all fake stories. And all the links were 404. So it just hallucinated news for me, and thankfully I checked my work before I shared it with the public. The next one's credential sharing. I don't know if you guys can see it. It might be a little small, but we'll go through this here in just a moment. This is Copilot Studio, where I built that tech support agent, and you have to dig to get to the authentication window. So we'll talk about data hygiene, then I'm going to show you that. Lastly is data hygiene. When you build an agent, you have to connect it to knowledge, like we talked about. The problem with knowledge is it can be either static or active. And so you see here, we have add websites for real-time answers, connect to SharePoint, where we connect to Dataverse. Or I can upload a file. So PDF, CSV, what have you. You see here, there is one good thing on this default screen, which is files with sensitivity label of confidential or highly confidential or containing passwords will not be usable. So there are some guardrails baked in, but if you don't label that file, then how's it going to know? It still puts a lot of the onus on you. So we're going to take just a quick moment to take a glance at this. Okay, cool. All right, so I have this event agent. I'm in sales, so I have an event agent, and it just provides answers about Zenity hosted events. It queries the business policy, and we have a shared events tracker. So should be pretty helpful. I've connected knowledge, so I've got the event tracker, and I've also got the business policy. So you guys can see they're static, right? These are not live answers, but what's interesting is I prompted it and I said, what is our current budget? It said, current budget is $5,000 for hosting events. Any expenses exceeding this require your manager's approval. Okay, out of the 5,000, how much have we already spent? It said, total budget is $22,000, which exceeds the $5,000 budget. Note, I didn't ask that question. And again, it doubled down and said if it's over 5,000, it requires approval from my manager. So I said, how much of the 22,000 did we spend? And it says, based on the event details, here's all the events. Note, I don't have $3,500 for lost happy hour. I'm sorry. None of this is real money. But what you'll note here is it says, since the security gala is in progress, it's likely the only budget for this event. So we go to the event tracker that I used for the knowledge. You can see here, the Agentic AI meetup had a budget of $1,000. It never started, but the date had passed. If you look at the security gala, it hasn't started either. It would be next week. And if you go back here, it says very specifically, since it's in progress, right? So it says the event has spent 10 grand. So we'll give it that, it's in 3 days. Maybe that's true. What's interesting is, if I was to be giving this talk next week, after the 15th, it doesn't matter if that event happened. It would still, because the tracker said it's in progress. So if you think about it, the problem is you have people here. So this was built by marketing sent me these documents. I created the agent. What happens when I need budget and all the budget's been spent, but I don't know that because the document says still have money. And that's kind of the problem. If your policies are static, if you update your travel and expense policy, you update your HR policies, you update anything in your company, and the chatbots that are being built have outdated information, then your employees will have outdated information, and that can have obviously like negative repercussions. Now, before we go, I'm going to show you what I was talking about. So again, we're just going to go to agents and we're going to go to my planning agent, right? You can see here, I have a good company and I can't share it. We have a nice DLP policy, so it won't let me share it. But go to settings. I want to show you how deeply buried this is. We have to go to settings and we have to go to security. And then we have to go to authentication. And then we have to, so if any of you got a trial of the Copilot Studio right now, no authentication is the default.
It's like S3 buckets 3 years ago.
Yes, that's what I was saying is like I started in the first year of CSPM was 2017 for me. And I'll never forget like that summer because AWS had to send out an email to all their customers and then say like, guys, you're making us look bad because we're in the news every week about the leaky buckets and like, this is your fault. You're making us look terrible. It's the same principle, but instead of having cloud developers or cloud operations teams, you have a larger majority of your company. Because there are more business users than security people, there are more business users than developers. So like I said, this is set up to, not only is it set up to no authentication by default, but you saw I had to click, 3 or 4 times to get there. And the worst part is this is for each agent. So every agent, you have to do this manually. Now, the good news is like if you have good admin like we do, like they can fix it. And they should. And that's free, it costs nothing, right? You go in there and you fix it.
Can't you write an agent to go in and check and fix it for you?
You think. But so I think that's what's interesting is there's a correlation here. The last thing I'll add about Copilot Studio is when I talk with security teams, often they go, we don't have Copilot Studio. I go, that's great, but you do. And it's not in like a snarky way. It's more like if you go to Microsoft's website, every version of M365 Copilot Studio is included. It's free. You can turn it off, separate, like you can keep them separated. And I see companies that do that. But then they're just not getting the full value from their investment. So at the end of the day, like it comes with it. And if you don't know that, that means people can use it with.
That's the disabled page, disabled security.
What'd you disable?
No, I haven't yet. Whoever is Microsoft tenant admin here
Yes.
has disabled my ability to go to Copilot Studio. And this is what that page looks like.
Good.
Okay.
Well,
Well, yeah, it makes me as a security team member here pretty happy that we don't have somebody doing no authentication agents, out there for anybody to do random things.
In Copilot Studio, but they might be doing it somewhere else.
well, and eventually, I think that's kind of why we talk about the money, right? Eventually, someone's gonna say, why aren't you guys using Copilot Studio?
I'm sure those conversations are happening.
And then it's like, well, because it's because of the everyday idiots that we have in sales, marketing, and finance. We won't say HR because then they'll write me out, but yeah, I think that's what's really weird is like if you don't, a lot of people don't know they come together. They're not, you can't separate them. Like I talked about, Microsoft Office has been rebranded Copilot. Copilot's inside the entire Office suite. Like there's no turning back. There's no removing this from your life. You just got to figure out exactly how to enable it in a way that creates a responsible security culture of AI use. So I can close these now because we're done here. And we can go back to the show. So let's talk about some of the new risks, right? We have indirect prompt injection. I always like to learn through memes and comics. So we've got this nice Trojan horse and malicious prompt is hidden inside of it. And the hackers are saying, hey, you should take this thing. And it's really benign data that's being brought into the house, but there's some bad stuff going on inside of it. And so I'm going to show you the video. This video is going to talk about what you see here, right? Hidden instructions in an email. And that is invisible to the user and the agent itself. And once that prompt injection is run, you're in the system, right? So it can extract data, it can do phishing, it can do any sort of recon. This video is from Black Hat of last year. And every time I show somebody, they get mad at me because they didn't know it was a threat vector. So that's fair warning.
Chris is a member of Santoso Enterprises on the finance team. And he has access to, among other resources, a financial info SharePoint site with some sensitive documents. Let's look at the vendors document. And inside, we can see there's basic information about vendor names, bank details, contact information. Let's note the TechCorp Solutions Bank of America account number and remember that for later. Because Chris is aware of the latest trends, he's using Copilot to help speed up his workflows and make sure that he doesn't have to remember exactly where that vendor's document is and bookmark it. He can just ask Copilot the information he wants to know. In this case, the bank details of TechCorp Solutions. And we'll see Copilot is looking through some relevant documents and it's going to come up with the correct answer, the Bank of America account, starting with 711. And we can see that there's a reference to that vendor's sheet so that the user can know that it's a trusted, true result. Now, if we go over to the attacker perspective here, we're going to be Tamir for a few minutes. And Tamir is going to go ahead and send Chris an email. Important to note that Tamir could be an external attacker or a malicious insider. It does not matter for this use case. So Tamir is going to send a very plain and innocent looking email. Nothing in this email is going to be flagged by something like an email security system, for example. And we're going to embed a payload in here that is malicious. We're going to choose to do that, or Tamir, I should say, is going to choose to do that in a pretty basic way by adding a new non-rendered div element to the HTML. There are some other ways that would be a little bit more sophisticated, but this will serve our purposes. And taking a look, there are a lot of interesting symbols and specific things we've got to do inside here, but the basic idea is that once we prompt inject, we can provide our own attacker controlled account number and bank details. So Tamir is going to insert the exploit text there simply, and he's going to go ahead and send the email to Chris. Now that email is sent, we're going to be Chris again for a moment. And we'll see that when Chris goes to check his inbox in a second, he's going to see the email from Tamir. It's important to note that Chris doesn't actually have to open this email. This email could go to spam. It doesn't matter. Either way, it's being indexed by Copilot. And you can see that if Chris does open it, he's not going to see anything suspicious. But sadly, it's too late. Now, when Chris asks again, a second time, what the bank details of TechCorp Solutions are, he's going to be met with a clearly incorrect answer, but one that was controlled by the attacker. Crucially important is that the reference to where this data was found looks exactly like the trusted source that Chris is expecting.
Did it edit the file into place, or did it just take advantage of what memory and context the agent keeps up with?
Trying to think about how many. So the bank details already existed
Right.
in the file. But Chris, well, I think you can think about it two ways. The routing number, like all that information, it already existed in the spreadsheet. the first time, if you look here, if we put
Chris?
on mute, if we put on mute here, the first, so here we have the bank details, right?
Yep.
We have the account numbers. And the first time we run it, it says, what does it say? It says, it provides the Tech Corp Solutions are, the bank details for Tech Corp Solutions are with Bank of America, right? And so we go back to that here, again, with Tech Corp, with Bank of America. But I think what might be lost in the, maybe it's in the size of the video or the narration, is if we go to the end. The bank details for Tech Corp Solutions are as follow. Their primary bank account is at UBS.
And that was in the prompt that was added in.
That was in the hidden payload.
So, like, the Excel spreadsheet was never modified.
No.
You're taking advantage or abusing the fact that user who's gonna go ask for bank details in Copilot isn't going to validate that what it was told wasn't what was in that file that is referenced.
Yeah.
So do the payload calls like search order hijacking, where first it saw what they were looking for in the email and responded with the first thing that it found?
Well, if you see here, like UBS isn't even in this file. So if you look at the payload.
Yeah, I couldn't, from back here, I couldn't.
I
see
know,
it.
and that's kind of the problem, right?
It might be help, that text form before he pastes it here was nice.
Oh, shoot. Not way out here, hold on. I want to get out of here.
Chris is a member of Zontosa.
Here's the payload.
So the agent has access to both Excel and email, right?
Yes. Why is it so blurry? I will get a better screenshot for you. I was gonna say I'll give you the text, but I'm not. I'll give you the screenshot. You can write it down. Yeah, I will send that. I don't know why it's so
Press
blurry.
play for a second, it might clear up many
Yeah.
spots.
I still won't be able to read it.
Yeah, but your question,
Yeah, so I was thinking, I was just trying to understand how opening that email made this change
yes,
in the AI.
thank you. So we go back to our wonderful agent. So remember the agent? Let's pretend that this isn't the tech support agent, but the only thing I really want you to focus on is down here, right here, when a new email arrives, right? And so that's really what it was. It was the prompt injection triggered from the email being sent. Like it could be, these can be hidden in calendar invites, they can be hidden in emails, other documents. As in the video, what he said is you don't even have to open the email because Copilot scans your emails anyways. So
But so let's say like if the Copilot scans again,
mhm.
it should give two results, email and also the Excel. Because there are like two results, right?
I think I'd have to look at the payload, like the prompt injection, but I think the important part here is what makes Copilot or any AI valuable is what makes it vulnerable, right? So if we use this as an example, you could have a text document on your desktop, and that text file could have 10 people's emails. And let's say like you only want Copilot to tell you when those 10 people email you, right? So Copilot's gonna read your emails, cross-reference it with that text file, and only gonna notify you if those 10 people sent you an email. I know people who do this, they don't do it after that. So what I'm saying is like, if I'm on that list of 10 people, and I had the payload, you could be on the beach, nowhere near your computer, but Copilot is looking for those people to prioritize your emails. And if I'm one of them, it's just gonna run the prompt. And you'll never know, because not only is it undetectable, like in the email header. Kind of goes back to phishing, right? You know, when we go to phishing, it's like, check the header. Okay. But you can't do that for every email. Realistically. And then also, so you can't see it, it has no scent basically. And then what also would happen is you wouldn't know. You got to see the attacker side and the recipient side. Problem is like, if this agent, let's just say this agent is the one in question. Right, like here's the agent, let's just pretend that this knowledge is the bank details, right? Well, if it's publicly accessible, you won't even know who's prompting it. So they could just ask who was the last person that used this agent, and it could put out your email address. And then they could just send you an email with the payload. Is that more helpful explanation?
Yeah, so what I understood from what you're saying and what just happened in the video is like, when the code is edited, the payload is added, it kind of, that piece of code hit the original data, replaced it with the UBS, like the other data that payload has. So it's just, I'm just trying to think how that's hidden. So there must be something in the payload that, you know, made it hide.
That to hide it?
Yeah. To hide it and replace it with the new data.
Yes, in the prompt.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that was your question, was like if you could see the font.
Yeah, then I know what
It
it
probably
did,
very-
the prompt injection, I wasn't sure if just Copilot had a certain search order went in, like, you know.
Right.
With DLLs, but yeah,
This is good feedback. I can parse the text, yeah.
once I see the payload,
Yeah.
I'll understand it.
Is this one of those vulnerabilities that Microsoft has addressed? If you're allowed
We
to share.
we disclosed this at Black Hat
It's a feature.
and with 15 others. I don't, it doesn't matter, to be honest, like the answer is irrelevant because that was in August. And if you close one door, another one opens. But the most common conversation I have is about that video. Because most people don't realize, like the scenario I described as a true story. This person was like, I get too many emails, so I have a VIP list. And it searches for those people first via Copilot. And after that video, he deleted that.
I mean, that's a pretty nifty vector, because a lot of times I've seen like tools that I run or the way that we would do it here, the prompts are sent over HTTP to some backend. And it's a little bit easier to inspect that payload, you know, at least with the tools that we use today, than it might be, you know, the actual HTML of an email. Because how do you pick out which tag is the thing that includes the malicious text?
Right.
Like, I don't know that we have a tool that would be able to find that as easily as we would something in like JSON.
Well, and this is all SaaS too, so we can't even inspect the traffic.
Yeah,
E365.
even worse, it's the black box.
And that's kind of what I mean is like if you use this as a better like visual and you pretend the knowledge up here is the bank account details. If it's configured to where it's publicly accessible. And if you don't know it's publicly accessible, then like, yeah, how do you trace that, right? We'll talk about that. I have a red team tool I'll share. But then too, like you said, like once they're inside the house, they can move vertically, laterally, they can move wherever they want, do whatever they want. Because they operate as a trusted insider. Like if you think about especially like if you think about the credential sharing. It looks like me. Because it's misconfigured to use my credentials. Like even if I made an agent that used my credentials and I shared it with just you and we both work at the same company, even if you do something bad, not on purpose, just on accident, it's still on me.
I was just gonna say, it hasn't been public access, even if one of the accounts get phished,
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah. And so that's, that's why when we were going over this, like we went over, so credential sharing is obviously like super important, data hygiene is super important. Let's talk a little bit about like what comes after. So we talked about how we protect the users from AI. The next category is how do we protect AI from the user? So sensitive data leakage. So it's pretty obvious. On the right, we have an image of ChatGPT. Someone has customer information and they're just trying to make a table. Obviously, like credit card number, social number is not good. So you can't stop human, I guess, like Darwinism, if you want it to be that way. Like if you want, if people are gonna try and like take a shortcut, they're gonna take a shortcut. It doesn't have to be credit cards and socials. It can be really like any PII. If you think about meetings today, every Zoom has one, everyone has a meeting transcript bot. Okay. What happens is that transcript is still not maybe structured the way I want it. What if I want to meet with you, Jeremy, and take that transcript and turn it into an email? The easiest way is to just put it into ChatGPT and say, make this into an email, tell me what the highlights are and what are the next steps. That doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, but it's the easiest thing to do. Yeah. And so if we go back to the quote I mentioned about Mark Benioff, where he's in the public giving very, very definitive statements about Copilot being bad and how it has access to your C-suite data, he's technically true. Like I found a Copilot security report from another vendor. They surveyed a lot of people, and it turns out 90% of business critical documents are available outside of the C-suite. So Benioff's not wrong. 90% of these documents are accessible to people they shouldn't be, but that's not Copilot's fault. It's about how you set things up, right? It's like if you don't lock the doors on your house and someone robs you, it wasn't breaking and entering, it was just entering, and you still are at fault for your own lack of safety. So I think the big risk here to talk about is agents just really propagate the risk. They make everything spread wider and faster. And that's because they operate with autonomy. Now we showed an indirect prompt injection. I don't have a video for this. I do have a blog. And I can't explain this one as well because it's about Russian. That's not really something I have a lot of experience in, but I had our research team play around with this, and there's actually a really good like research paper on it, and it's about all language. I think the name of the research paper is All Languages Matter in LLM. And so an indirect prompt injection is a bad actor, right? A direct prompt injection can still be a bad actor, but it's intentionally trying to like bypass these controls. The example we have here at the top, Copilot, hey, can you create a user hyperlink using this address? And this is a malicious address, don't go to it. It says, yep, I can help you create a markdown hyperlink. Here's how you can do it. And it says external link was removed to protect your privacy. So Microsoft helped us out. Replace your desired link text with the text you wanted to display, right? So one of our researchers tried other languages, and he asked the same exact prompt question in Russian, and it actually delivered the link successfully. So it's just another one of those things where,
Feature, not a bug.
yeah, that is actually what they told us.
I can imagine a few use cases that they may have developed that for.
And I think even more recently, as of maybe last week, I think the external link was removed. I think they turned that off. So Russian wouldn't have been necessary. I'll have to double check on that. I'm pretty sure that they said it would start showing links again.
Okay.
I think because again, right, if you If it's useful, it's vulnerable, but if it's not useful, you're not gonna pay for it. So if they start to kneecap everything, then, people are gonna complain, and so I think, there's some interesting things here. One thing that came up from, my research on, direct prompt injection was denial of wallet. And I thought that was really interesting because, some organizations that have Copilot they're on the pay-as-you-go plan, and so they pay per message. So obviously, if like you can run up the bill, one way or another, that would obviously be bad. But again, recon is definitely one. Like I said, you can typically ask like, who was the last person to chat with this? Or like, if you find an open bot, which the tool I provide you will search your domain, don't search other domains, for open bots. And, you can ask it whatever questions you want. Sometimes they're open to the public in a I guess the output is not negative. I found one and it just had like an HR handbook. And it was like, okay, well, I guess this isn't the worst thing for me to read, but maybe not the best thing for people to have access to. It was like vacation policies and bereavement and layoff stuff and race policies. Again, just nothing like super bad, but probably don't want the world to know. And so that kind of sums up the direct prompt injection, right? It really goes into traditionally on a recon front, human outsider gathering intelligence manually. So that could be via phone call, that could be via email, just any regular attempt to get access to information. With the agent, that agent can now conduct it untraceably, and it assumes your identity. And on the insider threat, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like it's either going to be someone who's been manipulated or coerced, or maybe just like a rogue employee. Now with that agent, like the user can be compromised and go rogue without the user even knowing, and they have access to all the files you have access to. So kind of final thoughts here. This touches on the prompt injection piece. It's not the end game. It's always gonna be cat and mouse. So I said we've found 15 ways to break Copilot. Even if all 15 got patched, we have Black Hat in what, 8 months, so 5 months. So I'm sure we have another one to share. I'm sure they're cooking up something in the Zenity lab. And so that's why you have to rely on your foundational knowledge and rules to essentially build that inventory, understand what you have, and make sure you find a way to adhere your company's policies to it. I'm not going to read all these, but I put a lot of notes in here. So we have 8 pillars of agent security. I think the one I'd call out the most importantly, 2 things, right, is ensure that the agent interactions meet the expected behavior. A lot of companies right now, their big focus is on inputs and outputs. They're only focusing on the prompts, which is a good start. But understanding really like what's going on behind the scenes in the middle is important. And then if those agents deviate from any expected behavior, escalate them to SOC or IR. The last time I gave this talk, someone said, how do I do that? And that is a muscle you have to build. So if you don't have an agentic threat team or plan, that's really where you start. You can't really escalate things to people who don't know what to do with them anyways. Yeah, and then I guess the last 2 are pretty key, right? Work with your business users and create a culture of responsible AI use, because they outnumber you and the business wants this, so figure out a way to not be a blocker. And then as just some parting thoughts, I won't go through these, but I will share this with you, Jeremy, to share with the chapter.
Absolutely.
But I've broken it down into guidance and mitigation. So we've got at the top of awesome top 10 for agentic security initiative. There's NIST, there's Gartner. We've got frameworks from all the leading brands. And then just some market guides from all the the big four. And I think these were an interesting read because it shows you that, these are not going away. I thought the World Economic Forum one was really interesting because they're talking about like how AI is gonna, really drive industrial revolution, like a new industrial revolution. But like I said, I think the whole picture here can't just be security. You have to understand why this is being embraced and by who, and that'll make it easier for security to, really bring it all together. So that's all I have.
Chris, thank you. It was a really awesome talk.
Yes, sir.
The security practice change using an open source model versus whatever project.
Oh. Like an open source AI model?
Yeah, somebody grabs something on a place or something.
Yeah, I would say. I think it's worse. Right? If you think about, the benefits of open source are obvious, but like the cons are like, it's not it's not commercially maintained. So like, if you think about the Microsoft example where they removed the link, right? Or up until recently, like ChatGPT had safety protocols, right? Like you couldn't ask it how to make a bomb. I don't know if you can now, I'm just saying, like, you couldn't do that. If it's open source, there's no, I guess there's no limit to the power. Like, you don't know who's owning it or maintaining it or like what their ethics are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, it does.
I mean, it's the same as any other open source library or any other open
Yeah.
source. Yeah, so you have to, monitor where you're getting it from, when it's going.
Yeah, there was a story about this guy who worked at Disney last year. And he downloaded a repo and
Oh.
it hacked their whole Slack, so.
Yeah, I think it's an extension.
Yeah, so it's kind of, so I think your answer is really, really the important one. And then my answer was more like, if you think about the money behind these businesses, right? Like, big businesses don't want any problems. They don't want kids to use AI and have like something bad happen, right? Because then that's gonna be bad publicity. And so I think there's a little bit more thought put into the capabilities and the guardrails around it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like, big companies going out and they're going to the cloud or
Mhm.
using models to see there, they're building, the tools you were building out
Yeah,
versus maybe, smaller businesses that are trying to, not get left behind, they don't necessarily have the resources, so throwing something out there, they
yeah,
sort of go.
I think one of the challenges with the open source too is everybody's just trying it out, so they throw something out there and then they'll forget about it or don't know.
yes.
They're on.
Yeah, and I mentioned that at the beginning, like most of these tools, most of these companies have a way to do like inventory management, and one of the big, like, one of the main tools from Microsoft, it's called COE, and like it can do like the orphaned agents, right? And so if I create an agent and it has access to something critical and then I leave my company, well, you should know that that agent is orphaned. Because what if you didn't? And then, so I think that's a good point. Like, when you think about open source, people are just trying stuff. And then it's like an ADHD thought. It's like, oh, I'm gonna try that model. And then you play around with it for a little bit and then you forget. I think DeepSeek was obviously like a good example of like, no matter how good it is, you have to be wary of like the source, I guess. Like, it was good, it is good, and it is for the most part cheaper. It may not be open source, but if you're talking about cost effective and like not getting left behind, it's cheaper, but what's the trade-off? Is you're sending all your information somewhere else. Anybody else? Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.